Trends photographers should follow in 2020. They're saying that this year we are supposed to go all through Shutterstock and do more stock photography, and now we should start doing more black minimalistic things. I've been seeing this everywhere. I don't know if you guys have seen this online, but it's been all over the place with this like kind of black look. It's basically all it really is it's practically just an entire black and white image that you do an edit. Basically black and white, just about everything except for the oranges, and then you can really use it for like a what's that name for overcast day? That's what it's called, overcast. Jeez. You can use it for overcast days, use it in a city or like in a coffee shop. You might as well call it like a mocha look. So these are some of the trends that are coming out this year for the Roaring 20s is what they're calling it, inspired by the 1920s. All of this is coming from F-Stoppers. Fastest growing trends. Let's see. Global trends are basically... Here's what I don't get. As photographers, we're always told, like, be creative. And what I'm seeing is the community's not really responding too well to this whole trend thing that we should be following all these different trends and stuff. I'd be curious to see what you guys think on these topics. Because as photographers, I think we're supposed to be a little bit more creative, right? Like, that's kind of our job. That's why we have jobs, is because we figured out something different, or we did something different than someone else, and then we were like, okay, well, that worked, and then that's how we make our business, right? So moving on, is the Sony A7 IV about to be released, and is it going to have a flip screen? There are some rumors going around about Sony actually finally releasing the next part of their Alpha series on the A7 IV. Personally, I'm actually shooting with an A7 III right now. I've been a huge fan of Sony for a little while now, ever since I saw that Sony was really good at night and had HDR and just a whole bunch of different features that I didn't really see in a lot of other cameras. I was just immediately attracted to Sony. As somebody who shoots photo and video, I thought it would be a great idea to grab a Sony camera. But I will say, coming from Canon over to Sony was a little bit of a hard switch for me in some ways, because I was so used to like such an intelligent touchscreen and a flip-out display if I wanted to vlog or be able to see myself better. Like right now, I'm looking at a monitor, and it was just way easier to use your camera for that. But for whatever reason, Sony has been very reluctant to update a touchscreen system or just actually like bring in any sort of like huge updates for the user interface, in my opinion. I just feel like Sony is definitely more of the advanced type of thing, but at the same time, they're catering more towards a lot of content creators now. Right now, the content creator camera that I would say most content creators are going for right now, these days, I would heavily argue that it's the A7 III. And I think some of the reasons behind that is because with the A7 III, you're not only looking at a great quality mirrorless photo, but you got HDR involved with a high dynamic range, making it way easier to shoot. It's easier to get your shots. The eye tracking on the autofocus is a absolute game changer for you guys who are portrait photographers. The fact that we can shoot video in 4K, like, man, you got to pay a decent amount of money to Canon to even get 4K. If you don't even want to shoot on a crop sensor, you can only get 24 frames. But Sony's putting out 120 frames and 1080 and 4K, and I mean, there's so many different things that go along with the Sony community, if you will, that I just feel like I think Sony is pulling ahead. I think Sony's been pulling ahead for, I would say, probably a couple years now, with all the different things they've been doing, pulling out with the A6400 and the A6500. And then the A7 II, I think, was a pretty big hit. But when the A7 III hit the market, that seemed to just be the biggest game changer out of everybody out there, just because it was the content creator camera all in one. You have a great camera with a 24 megapixel image. It's great for nighttime shots, so you can shoot a little bit later during your portrait, shoot around more dusk, and you have more room, and just a bigger sensor to work with makes it a lot easier. Same thing with your video, makes it just a lot less noisy of a video. Overall, just a really good camera. But the only thing is with Sony's versus Canon's is it's kind of like we have our Canon users over here, and then we have, which is kind of like you can go a little bit cheaper, you can get cheaper things. Then you have Sony over here, which is like, hey, we want to kind of revolutionize the way that we're doing things, but it's also a lot more expensive. So we're looking at probably, I think you're looking at anywhere from about 600 to about anywhere from 5 to 10 grand for just a lens for your camera, and so it gets pretty expensive in all of the, I guess you could say, just in the Sony world, it's very expensive, and it's definitely like a big change. But I think that's why Canon and Nikon are starting to fall behind with all of this stuff. And I think that honestly, in a couple of years, I think Sony's going to basically take over this entire photography kind of realm in terms of the lower tier content creator photographers. At the rate they're moving, they're creating new products and putting out new material all the time. But the other thing that raises the question is phones. We're looking at our smartphones that have 24. What is it? It's the Xiaomi Note 10. They came out with a 108 megapixel camera on a phone. Like, on a phone. Like, that's just unthinkable. Now, obviously, the image is compressed and you don't have as much detail, but in terms of like having a good depth, it was one of the few phones that didn't need portrait mode to actually pull off depth, which was really interesting because that's the one thing that I really don't like about, if you know me at all, I'm not a huge fan of shooting on my smartphone just because I don't get that aperture in it. But I'm starting to wonder, with how far everything's coming, is when are we actually going to switch over to our smartphones and have all the lenses that we need, that maybe in a couple years we're going to start having full-time smartphone photographers with all these different cameras that are coming out. I mean, probably going to have like 10 lenses probably on the next iPhone or something, right? So I don't know, I just think it's getting a little crazy. Speaking of screens, there is somebody named Andy Day on the F-Stoppers community saying, is it time to ditch dials and buttons and replace them with a huge LCD screen? Now, okay, I think there's a couple things to say about that, just because this is mainly focusing on Canon products. And usually, if you're probably used to working with a camera, obviously, you got your shutter, you've got your aperture, and those are just pretty handy things. I honestly don't know how I'd feel about having an entire LCD screen with that. It's an interesting concept, but at the same time, you're just trying to make really, really quick adjustments, and sometimes you're just like on the go. You're at a wedding, you're just trying to get around, or sometimes that touchscreen isn't always super reliable, or I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. I think it just comes down to, I think eventually, I mean, honestly, I just feel like you might as well just plug your phone. There might as well be a camera that you just plug your phone into, and then your phone can shoot out of the camera. Wouldn't that make sense if you had like a camera body and then just took your phone and just kind of slid it into the camera, kind of like a VR system, and then you just took your phone and used it like a camera? I don't know. I just thought that was kind of an interesting way of looking at it, because it just seems like everything's moving towards the mobile world now. Everybody wants it quick. Everyone wants it like fast. One of the things I was talking about today with one of my clients actually is we were discussing Instagram. And why is it that it seems like every time we put a lot of good photos together, the posts do really bad? It's actually, I'm going to go look at his account right now. I think we got about three times more engagement when he took the photo on his phone versus some really sick shots that we got with a helicopter. And I mean, all these really cool shots that came out. We're looking at 7,000 likes on the photo that I took of him versus 25,000 likes from an iPhone photo holding a speaker. I'm honestly kind of baffled by it, and I'm trying to understand. This is something that I can't say I haven't figured out. I'm still kind of in the analyzing process, but I'm just trying to understand, why is it that people will like and comment and freak out all over an iPhone photo, but when it's like a really nice professional photo, it just seems to bomb. Like on my page, I know on my Instagram page, I don't really post anything except for professional photos taking on my Sony, for example, or just a camera. But the more and more that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, maybe if we want engagement to go up, maybe we need to start shooting more on our smartphones, because I don't, from the creator standpoint, I don't see why people, maybe it's because they see a million of those a day. Maybe it's because, like, yeah, I've seen like this 25 times over before. Can we get a different color scheme? Is it that doesn't look as nice? Or I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm like honestly looking at my page like maybe I should just say screw it and just start going with maybe we should just start going with iPhone photos and selfies and stuff. Like I think from a content creator's perspective, you're kind of looking at it and you want to help your clients. And whether that means working with a influencer or a brand or a company, those are the things that you have to really focus on making money. Portraits, that's really not as big of a deal. Those are kind of like a non-negotiable. You want a nice camera, you want a good photographer. That's pretty simple and easy to understand. But going back to what it takes to actually grow a brand and grow a company, how are we actually going to grow companies, brands, and influencers if we're actually getting better engagement on the phone photos? Because why would they want to hire a content creator or a photographer to just shoot their stuff for them when they would actually possibly make more money and get more engagement on something that's just taken with their phone? Because I think as photographers, and I know I'm definitely one of these people, like I think I get so caught up in the branding side of everything, right? It's all about, okay, how do we make them look amazing and all that stuff. But I think the key to all of this, listen up real quick. I think the key to to getting more clients is figuring out how can you make your clients more money with the content that you're already giving them. Think about it. If your client is paying you $500 a month to do new product shoots and all of these different things, how much more would they pay you if you figured out a way to actually get these people to make money off of those new products every single month? What if it was just way easier to do that versus just making content? Because then you get paid more, your client's happier, and they're actually getting more sales, and your content's actually doing a little bit more. Because I think it's starting to come down to the point where companies and people, they're really not looking for, a lot of times, they're really not looking for anything super high quality or super professional. Like, there's a lot of local brands that I know that just, they don't care, and they're getting a lot of sales. And I think there's something to be said for that, because I think in the way that we think of business is we think, okay, let me get a ton of cash and then hire a bunch of people and then let's go make a business and then go find people, right? No. As a photographer or content creator, you should always start on your own, get enough money from what you're using until you build a business to start hiring more people and take on more responsibilities as time comes. And you really have to think about the long term as a content creator, because in a couple years, what's going to make you different from your buddy that lives 2 doors down the street from you, and he's got a phone that's worth just as much as the camera that you own? You guys are at the same price. You guys can basically, you have all the ability to shoot the same photos and all of that, and maybe the only thing that's holding you apart is experience. But if he spends maybe an hour on YouTube, he can shoot the same shot that you're trying to shoot, and he can make just as much money or even steal your business from you. So this is what I think is really cool that I really wanted to focus on with my client, is actually making my client money. Now, I am actually creating an offer right now to actually teach you guys how to actually add a lot of value to whatever your clients are putting out. Because you want to be able to give them value back, because if they're making sales, you make more money, and they will pay you whatever it takes if they're making profit off of it, right? Makes sense. If I go and hire, let's say, what can we use? Let's say I'm an Uber, right? And I hire a mechanic. And that mechanic comes to my car and fixes this car that I need to drive for Uber. And then I go out and make money with Uber. If I'm making profit, I will pay that mechanic whatever it takes to get that car fixed, because it's going to make me more money. I'm not going to have to go to him all the time, but when I do need him, I will pay whatever, because I always end up profiting from it because it's productive and it helps me. Now, if it wasn't being used for Uber and I didn't need to take a car anywhere or anything like that, then you might not consider getting to your mechanic. But since a lot of people are driven by money, there's a good chance that if you start creating value and help your client actually drive sales through your content, whether that's partnering up with like a marketing person or an ad agency or influencer agency, whatever that means, that is probably going to be a huge key in your business. Because if you can create almost a Rolodex of people, you almost become like a contractor. Because as a photographer, you shoot all the photos, right? But we all know that not all photographers make it just because they shoot photos. A lot of times, photographers freak out for a couple of reasons, which is they freak out over the taxes that they got to deal with. They freak out over they can't keep up with the amount of clients that are hitting them up, which is good, but they don't know how to handle their pricing, and they end up kind of slacking on the quality of the service, which is not something you want to give up. So if you create a Rolodex of people that are in your business, you will actually provide a ton of value to your client. And that is how you can actually be a lot more valuable and actually have a lot more worth than that guy that lives 2 doors down from you that owns a camera, calls himself a photographer, and has a black and white Instagram page that he calls his photography page. Then he says on his story, hit me up for shoots. You know what I mean? So that is, if you want to make it in photography, you need to create value for your client. Okay, because you got to put yourself in their shoes, and they're going to be asking themselves, well, why should I hire this person? Because if you make everything as convenient and easy for the client as possible, they potentially might pay you a lot more than they were going to in the first place, because time is money, and if they see it that way, they don't have to go out and find a graphic designer. They don't have to go out and find an ad agency. If you take the time to build an offer for your client, you are literally going to revolutionize the way that your business works. And this is what's actually going to keep you full-time as a content creator through what we're calling the Roaring 20s. So that is something that I've been doing with my business for a little bit now. And literally every time that I go to somebody, I have not had people turn me down for this yet. Every time I make them the offer, I tell them exactly what they get out of those packages and how they can do it and what fits their needs. And they're immediately like, why is no one else doing this? They're like, everybody can do the same job, right? Because I'm like, okay, well, I charge this much. And they're like, okay, well, I could literally fly my guy down from Utah, have him come down here and shoot the video and still save like $300 from what you're telling me you're quoting me for. But then I tell him, hey, I'm connected with this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this is how this is going to make you money, and this is going to make your life a lot easier, and you actually save money by working with me if you think about all the value that I'm bringing to the table. And that is what has gotten me so many clients in this past couple months. And I had a client that bailed out on me. I am not able to give you guys the information on who that was, but I had a client and completely bailed. And that was my main source of income. That client was a huge client for me, and I lost that entire source of income completely. So, but here's what I thought. I went back and I heard a wise man say this one time. This really cool guy. He said, you don't have a business until you have continuing income. And I didn't think about that until recently. But after I lost that client, I still had like 3 or 4 continuing clients that were still paying well, and I knew where my next paycheck was coming from. It wasn't like I was waiting on the next person to hit me up. I wasn't waiting and hoping that I would get a portrait shoot or whatever, or have to like knock my prices or do anything like that. No, instead I just had the clients that I had already had. I just relied on them for a bit and then took the time to find other clients. And within a couple of weeks, I was right back to where I was before. And so this is just a couple little quick tips I want to share with you guys through the podcast. This has been the Content Creator Radio podcast / YouTube video, whatever you want to call it. But I thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week. Hey guys, just want to say a quick thank you for checking out the Content Creator Radio. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and click that like and subscribe button and listen on all your favorite platforms like Spotify and Apple Music. Until next time, I'll see you in the next podcast.
I swear I like your style. Put you in Chanel cause it's just perfect for your smile. Girl, I swear for you I run the world, I'd run the mile. The way you